Hey, Kids Cook Real Food. Good morning. Even if it's not morning to you, we are here to talk about sleep with a sleep expert who has spent years of her life learning about sleep, figuring out how people need to sleep. Christine Hansen is here from sleeplikeaboss.com, and she just has a wealth of knowledge.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Thank you so much for being here. You guys, I have to say, I'm digging into Christine's information, and I just kept finding topic after topic after topic that I was like, this is so fascinating. Like, I'm so excited to share with my people all of this stuff. It's so good. So we're going to make sure that we leave links to all of Christine's information anywhere we share this video so that you can find her too. And we got to jump right into the information because it's so good. So Christine is a functional practitioner, and I have to start with, there are a lot of functional practitioners out there. Christine's also a nutritional therapist. There are a lot of people who do that, but I don't see people who focus in quite as narrowly on this specific area of health in the functional world and in the nutritional world. What prompted you, Christine, to become an expert solely on sleep?
Yeah, so I reverse engineered it a little bit. So I actually started with baby sleep consulting, which was triggered through me being pregnant and being super freaked out about not being able to sleep. So I handled that pretty well. But after that, I just, it's like when you focus on one thing, you suddenly see it pop up everywhere. So I saw so many people around me having that issue. So I got trained as a baby sleep consultant. But it wasn't necessarily what I really enjoyed doing. It wasn't quite a right fit, but sleep was like, I was there. I loved it. I absolutely loved everything on sleep, the science behind it. And so I got trained as a holistic sleep consultant, I think the title was, I'm not even sure, for adults. But it was like the typical education that you get on sleep foundations, like blue light, meditations, yoga, a little bit nutrition, but, like a foundation to what you should do first. And for me, it was not quite enough. So I wasn't quite confident enough, to work with people, or I wasn't quite confident to get there, especially those who really couldn't sleep. So where it was not something that had to do with time management, as in I sacrifice sleep because I have so much else to do, but really who couldn't, even if they wanted to, even if they had a great bedtime routine, even if they had sleep mask, goggles, everything, and still couldn't sleep. So I felt a little bit disempowered. I didn't feel quite confident enough. And that's when I started to look at scratching the surface and digging deeper. And so I found that first functional diagnostics was opening up this whole world to me, like hormones and thyroids and gut health. And I was like, oh my God, and it all has to do with sleep. And then I really wanted to dive deeper into nutrition. So that's why I added my diploma as a nutritional therapist. And I was like, okay, so now I have this beautiful picture. And when people come to me, I can see, red light here, red bulb there. We can take a little bit of this and that, and then we bind it together. And then after a while working with people and having experience with different types of people, I figured out what was usually coming up. And so that's how my journey basically developed.
It's so interesting to hear, people's journey, that you actually started with sleep and then went to the functional and the nutrition. So I didn't even know that. So it's probably good that I didn't properly read the bio.
I don't think I say that in the bio, so don't feel bad.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I think that order is really important, that you had a personal need in your own life. You sought out research, and tried to solve it. And then it was this long journey. And now you're sharing that with the world. So thank you for that. I think it's also really rare. We see a lot of people telling parents how to get their babies to sleep, right, where you started. And it is kind of rare about, focusing on adults. What is going on with adult sleep in this era, in the world we live in? And why did you decide to focus on adults, and then specifically those who think of themselves as bosses, with your Sleep Like a Boss?
Yeah. So I found with baby sleep consulting, a lot of it is behavioral, a lot of it is parent stress management and also baby stress management, but a lot of it is more on focusing on behavior and maybe environment adaptation, right? Whereas with adults, it's this beautiful 3D, even 4D picture that you have. You know, it's their life, it's their circumstances, it's their thoughts, it's their jobs, it's their family, and then it's their bodies. You know, it's like, are they women? Are they men? Are they in perimenopause or postmenopause? Have they had stress? Have they been traveling? So it's, for me, going on that journey with my clients and figuring out what's been happening to each and one of them is just super exciting. So it's just more me. And I think also the coaching part, you know, actually helping people to get out of that stress zone, to figure out who they are whilst still performing and loving what they're doing, or changing directions, or just knowing how to manage their stress throughout the day so that it's not coming to haunt you at nighttime. Those things, that's what's lighting me up, and that's what I'm really good at, I find out. So, and I'm doing it. So
you're like a sleep detective. Yeah, you're trying to like figure out the murder mystery in some ways. And I love that we're going to talk to you on our Kids Cook Real Food page, because even though you're not an expert in child sleep, it is so important for parents, for their good health, to first of all model good health and to be well rested so that we can, you know, properly parent our kids and rock our household like a boss. Yeah,
exactly. And it all ties together. So I'm an advanced therapist, brain development nutritional therapist. That's like a huge mouthful, but it basically teaches you nutrition for children to help them with brain development and to just help them with nutrition to address things like ADHD and so forth. So all of that applies to sleep as well, right? So and little people are not that different from big people in that way. So it's just all tying in beautifully.
That's great. So my hope today is to get some really practical strategies for adults, you know, listening for most of the interview, and then end with a few tips for those frazzled parents whose children aren't sleeping so well. Now let's start with why sleep is so important. I know in my own life that sleep is completely my weakness. I tend to trade in sleep for other priorities, and I see it as less important. Just, I think I can get through and I can survive just fine. I'm sure I'm wrong. So why should we start placing a bigger priority on sleep?
Yeah, so I think it's normal because, you know, if you just look at someone sleeping, it looks like they're not doing anything, right? They're just lying there, nothing happening. So that was why it had this stigma for such a long time of not being productive, you know, and you had Thomas Edison being super annoyed by sleep, you know, hindering its productivity in his company, which is why he invented the light bulb, to get more out of, you know, his workers, basically. So that's where that came from. But as sleep research has started to really catch up, and I would say it's been since the 70s and only in the last 20 years that it's really started to get momentum, the more we started to learn what it's actually doing. Like, nobody really cared about it. It was kind of this little, I don't know, like the black swan, the kind of ugly duckling thing, you know. And so now, as people start to do research and figure out what it's doing, we see that it's important for literally everything. It's important for your psychology, for your mental health, just as it is for your physical body. And a lovely kind of statement that I always say is that humankind is the only kind on the human planet or on Earth that is consciously sleep depriving themselves. So no mammal, no animal on Earth is actually doing that apart from us humans. So
way to go us.
So there must be something to it, right? And it's so weird that, you know, sometimes we're too smart for our own good. But the reason why it is super important is that it is actively doing stuff that you can't do when you're conscious. So you can really compare it to having a party. You can either be an amazing host, entertaining people, talking to everyone, sharing stories, creating new memories, but you can't chase after everyone, cleaning up, you know, and putting everything back into its place. So the same is true for our brain. It can't do everything when we're conscious. So when we're sleeping, our brain is actually shrinking. You have cerebral fluid cleaning out toxins. It's creating proteins or connections that it can't during the day to make sure that our memory is working and consolidating. That's why it's been very often connected to Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's. So there's a lot of research coming out that way. And then also for our body. So if you had a stressful day, your hormones will be a little bit imbalanced, and sleep is going to take care of rebalancing them. If you have tiny cuts or bruises or fissures even inside that you can't see on the outside, those are going to be mended while you are sleeping, which is why so many people say sleep over it. Or if you have a fever, have a good sleep and you'll feel better. It's because it's a healing process, literally. So if you don't sleep, all of that is piling up. So you, first of all, don't manage to get everything re-regulated. You build up toxins. Hormones will not be able to be rebalanced. And then also your sleep pressure, which is building from scratch each day, just like hunger. During sleep, it is basically being put back to zero. But if you don't sleep, your sleep pressure is going to be already at a certain level the next day. And so it's going to be even bigger. And so a lot of people walk around through life with a constant sleep pressure that's not at level 0 in the morning ever. And you can get used to that. But when I have those people then suddenly starting to sleep, it's like, oh my God, what did I do with my life? How did I even function? And you basically just miss out on so much by being exhausted half of your life, being too tired to meet friends, to enjoy your family, being grumpy, having health issues that have stemmed through not sleeping enough, being in danger, which frankly, driving and creating or being at risk to create an accident because you might nod off, because sleep is going to force its way back into your life. So it's just not worth it. It's just not worth sacrificing.
It's because you'll be less productive. Like if you're staying up to get something done, you're going to be less productive. If you're staying up to hang out with someone, you're going to be so much crankier the next day that you're going to be harming all your relationships that day. I know I've heard that if you are tired before lunch, that's if you feel like you could just fall asleep mid-morning, that's a good sign that you are sleep deprived. If anyone's wondering, if you think, oh, I get plenty of sleep, I'm fine.
Yeah, no, if you could fall back asleep in your cozy, nice, warm bed between 10 and 11 a.m., huge red flag. If you need caffeine in order to survive before lunch, huge red flag too. Yeah.
Yeah, those are good to hear. Honestly, I think a lot of parents kind of need that wake up call. Like this is something that you have to focus on. Oh, that pun not intended, but that worked out.
And if you feel that way, imagine what your child feels like, a child in full development, brain development, body development. And that's what I used to tell my baby clients. It's like, you feel tired. What do you think your baby feels like? They don't feel great, so.
Yeah. Yes, because for kids, sleep is so integral to learning. They're going to be losing information and losing, like you said, literally brain development. So if you ever think, oh, my 8-year-old is acting like a 5-year-old today, maybe it's, maybe it's because their sleep was not sufficient the night before or never is. Is it true that are most adults and children chronically sleep deprived, or many of us?
I'm not sure. I think children are better at regulating their sleep once they know how to do it. So they just fall asleep, right? I think adults, yes, I really think the majority of us adults is chronically sleep deprived. And another good telltale is if you have to Netflix yourself to sleep. So if you can only fall asleep before the TV is there to stimulate your brain. If it's shutting off, it's because it's literally a coping mechanism to get that sleep back. So I think children, yes, to some extent, also because of school. Actually, the circadian rhythm of a child is not meant to have them wake up super early, most of them.
Especially right? So adolescents, right?
Adolescents have a shift in their circadian rhythm, so they are actually delayed. So their prime hours are around 10 a.m. in the morning, and they are night owls during a certain phase in their life, which is normal. So in Luxembourg, school starts at 8. Some kids have to get up at 6 in order to catch the bus or the train in order to get to town to go to school, which is just too early. So even if they're there physically, you can imagine it like a car that has a cold engine, and it's not going to change. The warm-up time is not going to change. It's going to get in gear when the circadian rhythm is actually going to kick in. So you basically have them sitting there, but they are not able to consolidate memory or input that they are getting during that time. So it's a complete waste of time, actually. And I should know, I was a teacher for 9 years in a high school. So I actually liked morning hours because they would just sit there like zombies and just stare at me. So it was super easy to teach, but it's not productive, right? And my little one is 4. And she goes to bed around 7:30-ish, maybe 8, but she's super tired in the morning. Like she usually gets up at around 8. So a solid 12 hours of sleep. So next year she has to get up earlier. I'm a little bit worried because I've never really had to wake her up. Like I always let her sleep and wake up naturally. So, and when I do, it breaks my heart. It literally breaks my heart because I hate having to be woken up. So yeah, I think we'll probably have to miss the bus and take the car quite a few times.
Yeah, just to preserve that extra sleep. I read about a study that was done in America with high school students, and the school shifted their start time, I want to say 45 minutes. It was less than an hour, 45 minutes later. And test scores on the SAT, which there's only, I think there's 1,600 total points in the SAT, went up 250 points.
It's crazy, but I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised.
Yeah, just that little bit of extra sleep. They say never wake a sleeping baby, never wake a sleeping teenager either, which brings me to one of my practical questions. Are there better or worse ways to wake up? And then the tag along with that is sleeping in on like a weekend helpful or harmful?
It really depends. So the way that you feel when you wake up really depends in what kind of sleep phase you are in. So you sleep in sleep cycles. Usually 5 is the average, and each sleep cycle has different phases. So you have light sleep, you have REM sleep, which is when you're dreaming, and you have deep sleep, which is when most of the restoration of the body is occurring. But REM sleep is just the same for your mind. So when you can imagine it being from sleeping to consciousness, like a kind of gap that your brain and consciousness has to go through. So if you go from deep sleep to awake, the gap is much bigger. So it's going to leave you a lot more like dizzy. And I'm sure a lot of parents can remember when at 4 a.m. you hear baby screaming. It's like you get up, but you're kind of literally like tumbling and feel a little bit hungover because you're so oozing full of sleep, right? Whereas when you are in light sleep, the gap is much shorter and it's much easier to wake up and you feel a lot better as well. So the goal would be to wake up when you are in light sleep. And there's different ways that you can do it. One is to know exactly how much sleep you need in average, which would be that you test it out during a 1 or 2 week phase when you just go to bed naturally and wake up naturally and see what that time span is. And then you reverse engineer. So if you know I need 7 hours of sleep or 7.5, you just reverse engineer from the time that you have to get up to when you go to bed, right? So that time minus those hours equals that time at nighttime when I should go to bed. Another way that you can do is that you can use sleep gadgets that measure your sleep. I haven't found one yet that I can vouch for. I haven't tried them out yet. So I think there's probably some decent ones. If you find one, let me know. But they will basically look at how you breathe, how you move, and then they will wake you up when you are in light sleep. So that would work. Another one that you can do is with light. Your eyes, your skin, they all react to light. So having a light that's gradually getting brighter can help your circadian rhythm, and your little pineal gland, which is a gland behind the eye that's telling the body to either wake up or to go to sleep, to stimulate that. And that's something that I like, for example, and I work a lot with that when I have people who have a delayed circadian rhythm as adults as well. You know, so they're just like a teenager still, they would love to be awake till 2 a.m., work until 2 a.m., but then sleep until midday, which is unfortunately.
That's totally me.
Exactly. And for entrepreneurs who are working on their own schedule and who don't have a family, it's amazing because you can just do it. But unfortunately, for most of us, we have to abide to social conventions, which is ridiculous. But well, unfortunately, not everyone has figured that out yet. But if you can, you know, it's amazing because you know when you are the most productive. But if you can't, if you have to stick to working hours, then working with light, maybe the melatonin and caffeine can be something that helps. But you basically live in a constant jet lag in that case. And that's the same with sleeping in at the weekend. So if you're constantly sleep deprived and then you sleep in and have a longer sleep duration of like 2, 3, 4 hours, you basically create a jet lag situation. So it will help you to reduce your sleep pressure, but it's not a solution to everything. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Gosh, that's interesting. I figured that it might be a sticky situation. So if I'm thinking about waking up my kids, so my elementary age kids need to get up by 7:30, would it be wise to like just open their door and have the hall light on by 7 and like allow some of that light and noise to seep in? And then if they're not awake by 7:30, then, you know, you have to go in and do it. But
yeah, I think it would really help. I know that's what my mom used to do too, to switch on the lights in the hallway, switch on a small light in the bedroom, you know, and kind of get you to get awake that way. And you will notice, you know, when they are stirring, then it's a great time to go in and just, you know, help them to get out of sleep gently. Because if you have an alarm clock, it's your cortisol or stress hormone is like cranking up, which also means that it's going to have a crash again a couple of hours or half an hour later, which I wouldn't recommend. You know, it's not nice. It's not nice for the body. It's not nice for us. So I prefer a gentle way of waking up.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited about this because, like, I know sleep's important. So I've always thought every minute of sleep my kids can get, the better. You know, I would never wake them up too early. But it sounds like it would be better for them, better for their stress for the day for sure, if they could hit, like you said, that lower sleep gap, even if they get 15 to 20 minutes less sleep.
Just gradually, you know, have them transition from that state of sleep to state of the living.
Mm-hmm. That's so great. And now Christine just mentioned cortisol, you guys, which is a hormone. And I know that that's one of her 5 pieces of her sleep process. And so now if we go through all the 5 pieces of the sleep process, that would like finish all of our time. And I really want to do the practical, but I need everybody to know that you can get a free 3-part video series on that, or free, I don't know how many parts actually, video series at her website, sleeplikeaboss.com. So if you're interested in all of these detective pieces that Christine uses to figure out how to get people to sleep better, definitely go there. Just real quick, tell us what they are. I know hormones are one. What's the other 4, Christine?
So we start with foundations, you know, which is just sleep hygiene that I would recommend everyone to try out. And then we go into hormones, so cortisol, of course, but also steroid hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Then we go into gut health. What is microbiome? What are parasites? What is leaky gut? We'll go into the thyroid. How do you know? How do you read test results? And then we'll also go into nutrition. So mainly blood sugar levels, food sensitivities, and so on. So you will get a good taste and information about each of those. And then you can dive further if you want to. But you get all of that for free in my free video series.
Yeah, very cool. And again, a lot of sleep experts just sit in that first foundations, you know, what you can do, like physical habits that you can have. But I love that you go deeper. Now, of course, we talk a lot about food here. And so we gotta talk about food a little bit. How does food affect sleep? And does it go both ways? Does sleep affect food?
That was a super great question that you asked. So sleep definitely affects how you eat, right? So there's different components to this. One thing is that you have 2 hormones that affect your hunger and your fullness. So you have leptin and ghrelin that kind of tell the body first when you are hungry and second when you are full. When you're not sleeping enough, those are both affected. So you're going to feel hungrier earlier than regularly, and you will feel full later. So you will eat more and more frequently as well than you would normally do. The other thing is that your blood sugar levels will be affected because your body has more difficulty dealing with stress. So cortisol is having spikes and insulin is a byproduct as well. And insulin is basically, you know, helping you to regulate your blood sugar levels. But when it goes down, you often crave stuff. So you will crave carbs, you will crave sweets very often of the time. So I can see that also affecting basically your palate, the way that you eat food, the way that you taste it, your body will just crave different things. So if you have it all nicely balanced, you will actually see that vegetables are amazing with just a little bit of salt and pepper. Whereas before you might have needed a good chunk of cheese on top of it, right? So it definitely affects the way that you eat your food and that your food is affected. On the other hand, the same is true as to what you eat to affecting your sleep. So I'm a huge fan of protein and of low glycemic foods, which is basically foods that release sugar more slowly into the bloodstream, so that you have like a blood sugar curve that's nice and wavy and that's supporting you and giving you equal, like nicely balanced strength, rather than starting your day with, let's say, cereals and sugar, or a pastry that gives you a spike and then a crash at 10 when you need a coffee and maybe a little piece of chocolate in order to stop that craving, right? And you don't even know where it's coming from. So that's what I see affecting your sleep a lot as well. One thing, though, that you can do and that I've seen being recommended is to have carbs, healthy carbs in the evening, meaning carbs that are not releasing the sugar as quickly, as it can help you to then, as it lowers energy, to drift into sleep a little bit more quickly. Is it going to do the trick? Is it going to be the only thing? Most likely not, but it's a nice piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so like maybe a whole grain, like brown rice at dinner, would that be an example? Okay.
Exactly.
And then is there, like, let's say in our family we let our kids have one dessert a day, and it typically ends up being after dinner. Is that the worst time to do it because they're having that little bit of sugar right before, like an hour before bed?
I think you should, it depends the way that you calibrate things. Like, for example, I can eat sugar and drink coffee and still sleep. So it really depends on the enzymes that you produce and the way that your liver detoxifies. But I would keep a close eye on your kids. Yes.
Okay. So if any of them are having trouble falling asleep,
see
that
them
could
getting
be an
grumpy
area
as well, like restless. If you see them like being tired but not being able to sleep, that's usually a sign that blood sugar levels or cortisol is just too high. And for children, what I've seen most of the time is that they miss their sleep window and that they've gotten overtired. Because what happens is if they miss that window, they get an emergency push of cortisol. So even if everything is perfect, sleep foundations, everything, that cortisol is not going to make it possible for them to sleep. So it's like them having a scratchy woolen pullover on or jumper on. So I would really look at the sleep signs that they're giving you, meaning rubbing eyes, staring into the void, yawning is obviously a big one. And then as soon as that happens, get them ready to bed. And very often that sleep window is a lot earlier than you think it is.
So I think especially here in America, we let our kids stay up way too late. Way too many kids have televisions in their rooms, or they're on their screen, they're on a tablet, bumming around, like that's what they get to do in the half hour before sleep. I just really, and I think teachers are seeing it in classrooms too, and they don't necessarily know that it's sleep, but over and over teachers are saying, kids are much more, active and they're less able to focus and all of these things. Like we think it's an epidemic of another kind. I have a hunch that it's foundationally rooted in sleep because we just don't realize without those early wake times. Yeah.
I think it's a mixture between sleep and food. It's really those two things that are creating that behavior. And I saw it when I was working with babies all of the time. They would be easy criers in terms of getting grumpy, getting angry at nursery already or at daycare. And once they started sleeping, parents would just tell me, it's so much nicer. It's so much easier. They're so much more resilient to everything and just much quieter. They can suddenly play on their own. They don't need me all the time to entertain, and they start to try things and be more focused. So it is huge. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's definitely something to be troubleshooting if you're looking at your kids and thinking, like life is not ideal here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we figure out the right amount of sleep? And is it different for children and adults? I mean, obviously it's a different length, but is there a system or a process or a chart to know like what's the right amount of sleep for different people?
It depends. It's very individual. But my usual go-to is to say, if they fall asleep, or if you fall asleep within 15, 20 minutes, you've got that window right. And if you wake up naturally and you're feeling refreshed and amazing, that's the length that you need, right? So do it over a holiday period is the easiest, because you want to have time to try and let that process sink in over a few days, so 1 or 2 weeks. And that's the best way to figure out what your sleep is. Having said that, for children, it's for quite a long time, like to toddlerhood, it's 12 hours. It's a lot. If they have to get up at 7 a.m., ideally they have to go to sleep at 7 p.m., which is like, I just got home from work at 6:30. I know.
Right. And kids are in
parents like to hear, right?
Yeah,
We
exactly.
just pick her up at 7 p.m. from daycare. It's like, just to go straight to bed. So it's something people don't like to hear, but I just need to tell you.
Right.
And for adults, it's the same. You might need to cut off Netflix for a couple of hours, it's just, no. But having said that, for adults, it's there are more variables. So usually it's 6.5 to 8.5, 9 hours is the norm. If you need less than 6 hours of sleep, you're most likely fooling yourself. There's not a lot of people who actually need less than 6 hours of sleep. Actually, only 1 or 2% of the population, and it's often connected to a genetic defect. So all of those who say, I don't need less than 6 hours of sleep, it's like you probably got used to it, but that's not necessarily true. And if you need more than 9.5 hours, so if you sleep well and you're still really fatigued, then I would also go and check out whether there's something going wrong. And I would more go to a sleep disorder, as in chronic fatigue.
Yeah. Oh, those are very good to know too. So if you see those in yourself, take a vacation time. And obviously, if you're trying to figure this out, you don't put yourself to bed at midnight or 1 o'clock. You go to bed you have to really listen to your body and listen to your kids' bodies and go to bed when you feel tired. Yeah. And then see what that span of time is before you can wake up naturally, which is like becoming a lost art. Like people aren't able to do that anymore, I don't think.
But you'd be laughing. Like a lot of my clients, they go to bed around 10. They fall asleep at 10:30 and then they wake up at 5 a.m. That gave them a solid 6 hours sleep, sometimes 6.5. And they're like, but I woke up so early. Like, well, you basically have all the sleep you got. Yes, you're awake early and the world is kind of boring, but do something with that time.
Get something done, sure.
It's really funny because they're then complaining because they wake up too early. And I was like, well, I agree, but you're done. Your body's like, I'm done. So yeah, it's
yeah, the body's talking to you. Now, what about our poor parents whose children are waking them up in the middle of the night? Is there anything that they can do to mitigate the negative effects of missing that interrupted sleep?
It's hard. It's just hard. It's very, very hard. So I'm not going to go too much into sleep optimization and sleep training. I think that's up to different people. For parents, try to nap. And I know everyone is telling me, like, when I have washing to do. So here's the thing that I suggest. Get down to the numbers of your income, like crunch the numbers, see and get to terms with how much you're actually spending. Where is money going out of the window that you actually don't need? And can you invest that into getting help in the house? Like us getting a maid once a week for 4 hours has been life-changing for me, right? So, and now we have more help. But that was when I was alone with a little one and my husband was working and I didn't go, I had 3 months of maternity leave. And then I went back full time. But having that help was just like, oh my God, yes, please. But if you don't know your numbers, you might think, I can't afford that. That's not doable. What kind of a mother am I? And it's just, let's get to business. Like, this is a very objective exercise and it's not sexy and it's not holistic health. It's just literally logistics and seeing, okay, let's have one dinner less, or let's eat out once less during the week, or let's see, are you having breakfast at home, or are you stopping at a coffee shop and get a muffin and a latte? That's a lot of money every day. Are you smoking? Can you cut back on cigarettes? Are you having drinks every evening? So there's lots you can do, but it's a daunting exercise, but it's just logistics.
What a novel way to think about health. Like, can I rescue 4 hours out of my week by spending a little money? Basically, on your health. Like, this is an investment in keeping your family out of the doctor's office. But yeah, I've never really heard anyone. Yeah, that's great. So for kids, is good sleep always sleeping through the night? Like, is that our goal with our kids, to get them to sleep the whole night through?
Yes. I can really say that when working with these families, I could always see that having them sleep a great night through the night would make a huge difference for them. So, yes.
Yep. And so, so we talked about learning in those early toddler years, learning in the elementary age. And then we already talked a little bit about, I'm looking at my questions here. We kind of touched on adolescence and sleep. Is sleeping in on the weekends more helpful for them because of that circadian rhythm shift?
I think we have to cut them some slack and just say yes on this one. Like, would it sleep sciencey wise be the best thing? Probably not. It would be to have them actually live according to their circadian rhythm, but it's just not doable. So just let them sleep.
Unless you can have some impact on your own school, your school start times. Yeah, never wake a sleeping teenager. That's so interesting. Well, thank you so much, Christine. I feel like this was packed with really practical information, and I already have like a couple, just strategies in my head, like how I'm going to try to wake up my kids a little more slowly and just focus on sleep. I think it's worth a family conversation about. We talk about the importance of healthy food for our bodies, but how many families are actually discussing at the dinner table the importance of healthy sleep, and teaching our children to listen to their bodies and say, how do you feel when you have to get woken up in the morning, and how does this feel, and do you think it would be better if you went to bed in half an hour earlier? No kid wants to go to sleep. And we often say a lot of kids don't want to eat their spinach, but sometimes knowledge and education can really help that, because they want to be the fastest soccer player, and they want to be like a good reader and a good learner, and all of this is their ammunition. That's what the food, not the food, but this is what fuels all of those goals that the kids have.
Totally. And look for examples like this. If they like sports, there's so many sports teams that have sleep coaches nowadays, or individuals that have a sleep coach, or whether it is another passion that they have. Sleep is really getting out there. Like, a lot of celebrities have sleep coaches, politicians, and entrepreneurs, all kinds of famous and successful people. So it's easier to sell it on them, really. And then, check out my website. I have blog posts on pretty much everything.
Yes, you do.
On sleep and weight, sleep and circadian rhythm, how much sleep you need. There is a sleep evaluation tool there. So you can find tons of things. How to combat jet lag if you have to travel with your family. So lots of good stuff in there.
Yeah, super cool. So thank you so much for being here, Christine. Definitely check out sleeplikeaboss.com. And I think we're on the cusp of like sleep becoming more in the public eye, like you said. And eventually, the goal would be, in school, we teach physical fitness, they teach about nutrition, but schools aren't ever teaching about sleep. And I think that's like when we will know finally that as a human race, we've figured out how important sleep is. So let's start with that in our families. Let's talk about it, learn about sleep and how you can improve your own sleep and why it's important. Definitely something to educate ourselves on. So thank you so much for being here. And Kids Cook Real Food, definitely come back next week for another great, power-packed, tip-filled interview.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.